Today on my channel, I have Sarah Ledger, which she's been so kind to take time out of her schedule and be interviewed for my channel. So, Sarah, I'm going to let you just kind of introduce yourself. Sarah is known as Louisa Recovery on social media, on Instagram, things like that. And she's doing really awesome things in the recovery community. So I reached out to her because I'm so inspired by her story. And I feel like you're just such a light in the recovery community. You really are. So thanks so much for taking the time. Yeah, I'll go ahead and let you introduce yourself.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on, Vicky. It's lovely. I'm like Vicky says, hi, everybody. I'm Sarah Ledger. On Instagram and social media, my recovery account is Louisa Recovery Now. So my full name is Sarah Louisa Ledger. And when I started my Instagram story and my Instagram journey, it was my own journal. It was my own diary to kind of keep me on track and to make myself accountable to myself. And I put Louisa in there because at the time, I was afraid of people at work and people in my kind of smaller community finding out this journey that I was on, because I knew that my Instagram was going to need to be really quite honest. As time went by, actually now I'm really, really proud of the journey that I've been on and the recovery that I've done for myself and for other people, you know, in my family and what have you. So that's why it's Louisa on there. And obviously my actual real name is Sarah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Good idea. But I love that, like, at the start, you're kind of uncertain. And I feel like I was the same way. Like, before I recovered, I was actually quite embarrassed, kind of ashamed, just like it just was something like I didn't want people to know about me, especially going into recovery. But then as you recover, you're like, I'm pretty freaking proud of myself. Yeah. You know what? I'm going to tell people about it. So yeah, that's really cool.
But isn't that kind of just an absolute story to tell about what that eating disorder does to you? It makes you feel hidden, and it makes you feel ashamed, and it makes you feel like you've got something that you shouldn't be talking about. And actually, as you start to go through that process and you start to grow and learn about recovery and you become more recovered, this actually is something that you should be shouting from the rooftops. I had this horrendous illness and I'm recovering from it. It should be something that we are getting really excited about.
Yeah. Totally. I know for me, part of that was because I had tried so many times. I also didn't want people to know that I was going into recovery, because I feel like they would have just been like, oh, here she goes again, another attempt at recovery. So I kind of felt like I wanted to keep it kind of quiet until I could come out the other side and be like, I did that. Yeah. I did that to all those people who didn't believe in me anymore. So yeah.
And mine was also from a judgment point of view, because, you know, at the time I was a teacher. I still am a mom, still am a wife, I still am a daughter. But at the time I just didn't want folks judging me or any member of my family that, you know, I'm an older woman. How on earth did this happen to you? How did this happen to your Sarah? So yeah, there was a very definite judgment for me at that early start of my recovery.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So tell us a little bit more about your journey. It sounds like you started, I know this, you developed your eating disorder much later in life, right? So can you tell us a little bit more about what that was like and kind of your journey with it?
Yeah, so I was diagnosed with anorexia nervosa in August of 2017. So at that point, I was 38. I'm now 43. So I was what they call late onset anorexia. I'd been poorly for years before then, but I had never been poorly as a teenager. And I think that's the bit that sometimes people find a bit strange about my story, or a bit different about my story, is that this isn't something that I was plagued with when I was growing. This is something that happened to me as a developed, growing adult woman. And so before I got the diagnosis, my illness manifested itself with the desire to be fit and flexible at 40. That's what I told myself at about 35 years old. So I had my daughter at 30. And then there was that thing where we have that, you know, must get rid of the baby weight. And that kind of started me off into a cycle of exercise and healthy eating. And then it was this, right, by the time I turned 40, I want to be fit and flexible at 40. Yeah. And then as I was kind of going on that journey and I was becoming more of my starved brain and becoming more obsessed with that exercise, that's when it triggered the eating disorder. And that's where, in that build up in 2017, things kind of spiraled out of control. And then I was diagnosed in August 2017.
Okay. Wow. That's so interesting. How something that seems so innocent, right? I mean, how many of those types of things do we hear all over the place? Fit and flexible by 40. I know there's a lot out there right now. There's always the New Year's resolution thing, lose this amount of weight in this amount of time. there's even like lotteries that people will go into, and it's like whoever loses the most amount of money in the fastest time, you know, wins the whole lottery. And it's just like all of these things that seem like they could be harmless for people that are predisposed to an eating disorder. It's detrimental. It's devastating. So yeah, it's really interesting.
And for me, when I look back, it was the speed at which things got like disastrous. And like I said, and I never shy away from this. Like I was a teacher, I'm a mum, I'm a wife. So I had everything around me that was meaning that this shouldn't be affecting me. This shouldn't be something that you would get affected by. But it spiraled severely out of control. I was, like I said, I was diagnosed in the August. Early September, I went for an appointment at a day hospital. I didn't know what it was. I just thought it was just another place you had to go sometimes to the doctors, because here in the UK, you sometimes have to go to different places to get different assessments. So I went to what I just was assumed was just another doctor's surgery. I went, they sat me down, they did an ECG, they did a couple of other tests, and then it was like, right, we need your car keys, we're phoning your husband, you're going to hospital now. And I was like a screaming banshee. I was like, you can't do this, you can't take my car keys away from me, you can't take me to hospital. Yeah. But lo and behold, they did. And then I spent a few days just in a general hospital, and then I was admitted to proper day service, full-time hospital for 7 months. Wow. But I had no acknowledgement whatsoever that I was basically on death's door.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I feel like eating disorders don't discriminate, right? I like what you said about like, you're a grown woman, you have all these things, you have a great husband and a beautiful daughter and a job and friends. And it's like, I couldn't have an eating disorder. Why would I ever? And it's like, actually anybody can at any age can have an eating disorder. If you have the predisposition and your body weight drops to a certain point, regardless if it was intentional or unintentional, you're going to trigger that eating disorder response. And so, yeah, I think that's so important to
And that's why it's really important that we see it as an illness as it is, isn't it? Because then there is no blame that can be attached, because you didn't choose this to happen.
It's not a choice.
No, you were going on a journey and something inside you triggered that response. And then it becomes that thing that you are almost driving and striving for that horrendous endpoint that the illness is heading you towards.
Yeah. And just the complete denial or oblivious to the fact that you were sick, right? That's how many people actually are like, I'm really, 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 really sick. I know I'm really, really sick. And I really, like, it's just very rare that you see that. Usually people are thinking that they're okay or not that bad, and really they can be on death's door.
So and I did my 7 months in full-time hospital, then I went to day service. But when I was released from full-time hospital into day service, I then, as soon as I got into that real world, because I wasn't in a recovered mindset, I was more nutritionally rehabilitated. Sorry, I can't see the words. But because I hadn't worked on the behaviors, I then relapsed and spiraled again. So it wasn't until when I woke up in early January 2019, and I was just so furious and angry that's what I then call my real recovery. So for me, recovery started in January 2019, which is when Instagram started for me.
Yeah. Do you remember, I mean, yes, it sounds like you were very angry, but was there something in particular that January morning that you recall, any kind of thought process or event that like kind of triggered that I'm starting recovery now?
I'd had a horrendous Christmas. Like, I'd had a horrible Christmas the year before because I was in services, and then I had this other Christmas that I was and then at home, and it was just, I'm like I'm touching my face just thinking about it. It was just a car crash. It was a horrendous Christmas, and at the time my daughter would have been 10, my obviously husband and family, and I just remember having this horrendous Christmas day, and Boxing Day was, just as bad. And then somewhere inside me, this anger just started to bubble. And I'd had to learn just previous to this what anger was, because one of the numbifications that eating disorders had done to me, it had not allowed me to have a proper emotion for 3 or 4 years. So I'd been just kind of numb to everything. I wasn't happy. I wasn't sad. I was play acting, but there was no real emotion that was happening. So when I'd kind of worked with my therapist about what anger is, suddenly when I started to feel this thing in my tummy, it was almost like, I don't want to say I was enjoying it because it wasn't a nice feeling, but it was this sense of I could use this. There's something in this feeling that's suddenly generated in my tummy that I've not felt for years, and I could use this. So it wasn't a New Year's resolution thing. It just all kind of happened because of that horrendous Christmas that I'd had. And I just thought, enough is enough. There is only one way this is going to go. I'm going to lose everybody. You know, if I go back into hospital, my husband will not be here. My daughter will not be here. My mother was exhausted, absolutely exhausted. And ultimately I wasn't going to be there. So it was the anger of December that really projected me into January.
Wow. That's really, I think that a lot of people can resonate with that. And it's what you do with that anger, right? You turn that into a positive, and you thought, I'm going to let this anger, I was the same way. I'm going to let this anger propel me into recovery. I'm so tired of this destroying my life. I'm so tired of this taking everything good in my life away from me. Right. So I think that's really, really inspiring. So when you then decided in January, okay, I've got to do this. This is the start of my real recovery. What were your next steps?
So when I tried recovery before, I spent a few days kind of like putting this together. I'm a planner, I'm a lister, but this time round, I knew that the lists I'd done in the past was a case. Look at me, I'm in recovery. I've got a list, and I've got a bar chart, and I've got a folder, and I've got all the books in the world, but I wasn't doing anything with them. So this time it was like when I'd rehabilitated the time before, it was all about the food. And I knew I had to do that nutritional rehabilitation because I'd read enough to know that my mind needed to get rid of some fog. But I also knew this time around that the behaviors were going to be king for me, because when I tried before, it was the behaviors that came back and bit me when I thought that I'd kind of worked through them. So I made a list of what I actually called like the hinge behaviors. So the top 5 things that I thought if I could crack them, and they might have been tiny, they would have a knock-on effect to bigger and more recovery wins. So rather than just focusing on bread or cereal or bacon or cheese, I actually focused on, what's the behavior that you're doing that's preventing you from actually having that freedom and that flexibility with food and with eating out and all the things that I was not doing. So it was those top 5 hinge behaviors that I then worked on in the first 6 months.
Okay. would you be willing to talk about them just really briefly?
Yeah. So the big,
I know I'm putting you on the spot. Like if you remember the 5,
yeah, I might not remember all 5, but I just remember some of them. So I knew that the behavior for me, ultimately, that I needed to crack soon was weighing myself. That the fact that 7 times a day I was weighing myself. The fact that when I got out of bed first thing in the morning, the first thing I did was weigh myself, meant that initially, as soon as I was waking up, I was in an eating disorder mindset because I was standing on those scales. But in January, I knew that was too big a deal. So I thought, right, what could I do about weighing that meant that I was going to ultimately be able to build up to stopping weighing myself? So I went to 2 food types, because I weigh, like most people probably listening to this, in certain parts, you weigh and portion everything out. So I went to 2 food groups that I thought if I could crack not weighing them would be a real gateway into other types of food. So I worked on milk and I worked on fruit and vegetables first and foremost. So I stopped portioning and weighing milk and fruit and veg. What that meant was that by stopped weighing milk, I was working on my breakfasts. So breakfasts for me were the meal. As soon as I hit my feet on the floor, I had to start recovery. So by not weighing milk, it then meant I could eat cereal. I could start to learn how to eat cereal. It meant I could be adding milk to tea and coffee and hot chocolate and things such as that. Stopping weighing fruit and veg was a really important signal to my eating disorder, because who weighs salad unless you're entrenched in an eating disorder? You know, let's be realistic. No self-respecting adult is going to stand there weighing lettuce unless they are entrenched in a real severe illness. So I taught myself I didn't need to weigh fruit and didn't need to weigh vegetables. That then, the next stage of that was then obviously, well, if you're eating this breakfast with this milk you're not weighing, then you don't need to weigh cereal anymore. If you don't need to weigh cereal, then you don't need to weigh rice and pasta anymore. So you can see how actually that one change of the weighing of milk actually then allowed me to learn how not to weigh all these other types of food.
Right.
then as I went through that process, I'm still building towards that day when I went, right, you've learned not to have to weigh these food types. So let's start learning how not to weigh yourself. And that's when that massive can of worms opened, and I started to stop doing that behavior. But what it is once it's in. So once you stop weighing something, you don't then start again suddenly. Once it's in. So it's all of a build. So once you decide that you're going to change these behaviors, you're adding to them. You're not doing it for a bit and then ditching it to replace it. You're adding all the time. So your toolkit's getting bigger.
Right. Yeah. I think, and just by doing those small changes, it's kind of weakening that wiring in your brain to even realize there is maybe perhaps another option here. Like maybe I don't actually have to weigh everything. When you talked about weighing lettuce, that reminded me, hadn't thought about this for a while, but I do remember my husband, he'd be like, why are you weighing your lettuce? This was an eating disorder. And I to the death would defend that and think that was normal. Like, I can't believe how many arguments you have, like, this is normal, stop bothering me about it. But listening to you say that reminded me of that. It's like, that's not normal. No. If you're listening to this and you're weighing out your fruits and veg, not normal. No. Actually weighing out any food, not normal, unless you have a recipe that you're following, you know. And here in the States, so we do, you know, cups and tablespoons and whatnot. So we really have no need for a food scale, but I know sometimes recipes will call for that, but otherwise there's really no need to be weighing your food. So I think that's really important to note that, like, well, I guess I'll let you talk about your gradual and phased approach to recovery, because I think oftentimes people think of all in as just balls to the wall, every single behavior, fear food, everything is just the very first day you decide to recover. It's all, you've got to get rid of all of it. Every day needs to be perfect, just getting rid of all of it. And I see all in more so of you're completely committed to your recovery. You're willing to sacrifice and do whatever it takes for you to stay on track in your recovery and continue to progress towards a full recovery and being free from your eating disorder. So will you explain kind of your all in gradual phased approach to recovery?
Yeah, definitely. My all in was all about not so much going all in terms of food, but giving my all to recovery. That's where,
right, I love that.
For me, that was where it was a big difference. So once I decided that recovery was going to be my focus, it was about giving my all to it. And the phase, I started with these key kind of hinge behaviors that were going to be developed upon. But then it went into everything. So for instance, when I was thinking about, one of the big things for me was food shopping. So I had to do food shopping because I'm a mum, but I would do it in a very eating disordered manner. And I would do it in a way that either was filling up things for my family, but I wasn't getting anything for myself, or I was spending absolutely hours in the supermarket. So that was a behavior that I had to kind of like learn how to do. And I would literally like stop, put a timer on my phone and only give myself 20 minutes. And whatever I got in 20 minutes is all I could go home with. So I learned how to actually go into a supermarket and get a weekly shop as quick as possible, rather than spending 45 minutes trying to decipher which tin of beans had the less calories in it or whatever. Gradual exposure was about my end point, ultimately going to be recovery. Now, how long that took me was down to me, and it was my decision to come up with that. But it was about how you layer things. But every single day, you are giving your all to recovery. So,
right,
it's based in the fact that it's really, really hard, and you're going to have tantrums and crying and tears, and as going to be painful. But every single morning, the minute your feet touch the floor, you are starting recovery. So in that all-in approach, I even started like putting my cereal in my pants drawer that's next to me by my bed. So I literally like sit up, put my feet on the floor, and the first thing I would do before I even was eat some form of breakfast cereal, breakfast bar or whatever.
Yes.
I was saying to my eating disorder, you are not in control today. So I'm in control today, and it starts very second.
I love that.
I couldn't be. I knew I'd have it in me to be an all-in girl in terms of, you know, I'm just going to eat everything. All power and respect to people that can do that, because ultimately, actually, you're going to get to that destination quicker. But for me, I just had to take it slower. I just knew I had to learn, because behaviors needed breaking, and I knew they were going to need some time and some persistence.
Yeah, I love that. I did the same thing, and I talk a lot about this on my channel, and it's interesting how we're all similar that way. And it's a very effective tool that wake up, you get food in your mouth. And for me, that was that candy bar that I ate every single morning, just to kind of, it was like I considered it like my medication, like my just getting up. And eating disorders are just kind of autopilot. Like you're just falling back into that routine if you're not doing something to interject, to interrupt that thought process. And so I love that you had that bowl of cereal and you just grabbed it and started eating as soon as I wake up. For me, it was that candy bar. I just opened my eyes and started eating it. And it's amazing how many people that have done that come back to me and are like, there's something to that. What is that? I don't understand. How is that making me? And they propel themselves into just that small behavior of just starting their day with food in their mouth immediately, something challenging, how it kind of changes the trajectory of their day and their recovery. So yeah, that's really interesting. I didn't know that you had done that as well.
And the thing is like that voice, that eating disorder voice is there, and whether it's there for the rest of our lives, I don't know yet. I've not been recovered long enough to know, but I do still, now I'll do things and I'll think, hang on a minute, are you back? Is that voice I can hear twittering in my ear? But every time in recovery, I say to folks, it's about smacking that voice in the face. It's about shutting her up or him up in that very moment at speed. So as soon as you can hear that they're twittering on at you, you need to do something to shut them up. And often they get you as soon as you wake up. They're like, ha, you're mine. And if you let them have hold of you, then they've got you all day. So those actions just as you wake up, I think are absolutely crucial, which is why stopping weighing yourself, in my opinion, is a really big thing, because we often do that as soon as we wake up. So we're right in that eating disorder mindset.
Right. From the Absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the biggest things you have to overcome in recovery is that fear of weight gain. Stepping on a scale first thing in the morning, what is that teaching our brain, right? Our weight's still very important to us. Yeah. And as far as the thoughts go, with time, as you continue to ignore those thoughts and you do the opposite and you hear that little bit and you do, you know what, shut up, I'm going to eat a brownie, and you do it, over time, the thoughts stop generating because they're futile. You're not responding to them anymore. And it's been enough time that your brain's caught on to, we don't think that way anymore. We don't need to do those things anymore. So yeah, I love that. So one of the things that you talked about in your toolkit is how when you would think of something, and I think this is so effective. I did this as well myself in recovery, but I love how you articulated it. When you thought of something that you wanted, or you're out with somebody, out to eat or something, and you have this overthinking problem, right? As does everyone, of you see something you want and then you quickly, immediately doubt, fires in, and it completely just obliterates everything that you were thinking you wanted. So what did you do to kind of negate that?
I sounded like a complete nut job is what I did. So I literally said everything out loud. And I don't mean whispered, I mean out loud. So the best example I remember was when I'd forgotten to tell my mum that this was one of my new techniques I was going to be choosing to use for my toolkit. And we were in a cafe, and cafes were a big deal for me that right. I do a lot of work with. And so we're in a cafe and we're in the queue waiting for the queue. We're going along and I'm looking at all the food and she's shouting at me, the eating disorder's going wild. And as soon as she does that, I just looked at the menu and I shouted, I'm having a cheese toastie. And my mom went, what? And
what's wrong with you?
Everyone in the cafe was like, what is wrong with that crazy lady in the corner? But I literally, for a long period of time, the minute I thought I was in that indecisive moment, because like you said, overthinking and making decisions was such a big deal for me, the first thing my eyes landed on, I said it out loud, whether I was at home, whether I was out somewhere. And that was even when it became things like clothes shopping even. So like lots of us have, I had an issue with clothes and sizing. I would walk in and I would say, I'm a size 16. And I would just grab the size 16 and off I would go. It's something about,
I love that.
Committing it to the ether, committing it to the outside world meant it was out there. So she couldn't change my mind. It was like, my commitment is out there now. So it's out there. I've got to follow through. So it was everything. So I said menus, clothes, food at home, whatever it was just basically say it out loud and say it proud and say it loud, but then follow through. That's the biggie, is that you make a declaration, you say it out loud, you've told everybody in that cafe you're having a cheese toastie, So then you have to sit and eat it, you know, and it's and that commitment to yourself then is right. This is what I wanted. This is what I've had. I'm going to sit and eat it.
Yeah, I love that. It's kind of just like owning it, right? It's just owning the fact that you want a cheese toastie, owning the fact that you're that size. I feel like when I would do that, it would make me feel empowered and more confident in I'm choosing this instead of looking at a menu and going, oh my gosh, cheese, I want cheese toastie. What do you want? I'll have the cheese toastie. It's there's so much more trepidation and fear involved in that versus just I'm having a cheese toastie and just owning it. I feel like there's something like that switches. I do the same thing, and in my brain it would just feel more empowering. Or same thing with shopping. Okay, well, it looks like these are the pants I'm wearing these days, and I just pick them up and just kind of like, this is how it's going to be, and just owning it. I feel like is really, really empowering. So I just love that tool that you practice in recovery. I think it's awesome. So and it's really cool.
It helps with all the things because, well, like the step before that is as soon as your eyes landed on something, because obviously menus can be an absolute nightmare, can't they, in eating disorder recovery. So as soon as your eyes land on that thing, whatever it is, the first thing, doesn't matter what it is, that first thing your eyes land on, you say that out loud and there's your choice made. Menu.
There it is. You don't have to question it. Yeah. You don't have to start overthinking it and doubting it because once it's said, that's it. It's happening. So yeah, I love that. Can you talk a little bit about recovering as a mom? I have a lot of people who follow me who are moms because I'm also a mom, and it's kind of a whole nother ballgame being a mother in recovery. Can you talk about what that was like for you? Yeah.
So my Amy's 13. So she obviously was in her adolescence and preteens as she's gone through this journey with me. Because of her age, we obviously protected her as much as we could, but ultimately as a mum, if you're then in services like I was, that your children are going to want to come and visit you. So you do need to make a decision as to whether you're going to allow them into the mental health hospital or if you're going to keep them at home. We made the decision that she could come and visit. So she used to come on a Wednesday with her dad to visit me in hospital. That then made me kind of decide that I wasn't going to let her into the nitty-gritties of the illness because that's not helpful. But I wasn't going to shy away or hide from using the language of the disorder. So we spoke about anorexia, we spoke about recovery, we spoke about the things that I was talking about. She knew I had a psychotherapist, she knew I had an occupational therapist. So kind of involving her from that point of view. There was also a time in that where actually she was involved in my toolkit. So we would go out and I would say to her, Amy, when we go to your favorite cafe, would you just order a brownie and we'll share that brownie? And I would just bring her in almost as a support to me, because then she was part of that process with me, but also because then she was also learning that this was new mum. This was mum that was going to start to share in these situations with her and no longer be sat on the sidelines. That then, though, from a recovery point of view, puts a lot of pressure on you because there are moments of fear, aren't they? And those spins. And obviously I didn't want Amy to see that. So then I often would maybe have to go and have a little cry somewhere where she wasn't watching and what have you. I was unfortunate, but fortunate in that my eating disorder meant that I had to have an extended period of time off work. And what I learned to do there was to be a mum that wasn't a working mum. So I learned to take Amy to school, which I'd never, ever been able to do before because I'd been working too hard. I'd learned all sorts of things and relearned how to do certain things to help her and to make it so that I was actually really enjoying this time that was crazy and could have been really, really detrimental because obviously I wasn't at work at that point in time. The other things about obviously motherhood is that you are still having to provide. And that's tricky in recovery because there are certain parts in your illness where you can't fuel yourself, but you still have to fuel and provide for your family. So it's then trying to make it so that for me, it was about making myself part of that again. So again, there was a period in recovery where whatever Amy wanted for tea, I had. So Amy, what do you want for tea? Oh, I want pasta bolognese. Okay, we'll have pasta bolognese. And I used to sit next to her. She'd get her dish, I'd get my dish, I'd sit. The next thing I do was just check that my portion was bigger than hers because I'm 40 and she was 10, 11. So I should be eating more. So yeah, my portion is bigger. Right, we'll sit, put the telly on, a bit of distraction. and let's eat together. She didn't know the steps I'd gone through in order to get there. But
right.
what it was that me and her actually were having this lovely time together, mum and daughter, always eating the same thing. You know, if she said cheeseburger, if she'd said whatever, I don't know, fish fingers, that's what we had for tea. So for me, it was kind of involving her in the bits that were healthy and were not going to damage her. And then also allowing her and taking things on by her lead that were going to ultimately help in my recovery as well. And just checking in. So if you are a mum and you are listening to this and watching this video, it's fine for you to say to your therapist, look, I think I might need some help for my family. I think how do I deal with this if my daughter starts asking certain questions? And just leaving the door open if possible, so that your children can get someone to talk to if they need to as you're going on this process, because that's very healthy. It's very healthy for them to also have someone else to talk to and to talk through what they've maybe seen or heard and how they can be getting some support with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that we can use our kids for support and accountability without them even knowing, right? Like how many of these things that you explained, it's not like you sat Amy down and said, okay, Amy, we're going to have dinner together, but I need you to pick the thing. And then I'm just going to have whatever you're having because this terrifies me and it's good for me to not know. And then you serve yours up and whatever you have, I'm going to make sure I have more of. And then like, you don't have to say any of that. You just kind of do it. And that accountability right there, they have no idea. They're just joining in, loving that you're part of something finally with them. Yeah. And it just, I feel like kids could be such an asset in our recovery, even if they're not 13, even if they're 2, your 2-year-old, right? It's like, let's see, my 2-year-old, she loves to have peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for lunch. So let's have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. She doesn't have to know why you're eating, or choosing that. So I think that we can absolutely, I think people are afraid of that or think that they can't do that. And absolutely, I think it helps so much to be able to use your kids.
It goes back to that saying things out loud technique. So I would just stand at the bottom of the stairs, Amy, what are we having for tea? And she'd shout, pasta bolognese, and I'd go, marvelous. And that was it. It was out there. It was chosen. So all of my choices had been taken away. It was a really lovely meal that we both could share. We sat together, we watched a bit of telly, jobs are good. And there was nothing in that process that doesn't make it actually a really healthy and loving experience.
Totally. Absolutely. Yeah. I remember doing the same thing too, where you'd be like, go in and get a brownie, just get a brownie. Or I would tell my kids, let's go get a treat. What do you guys want? Instead of me overthinking it, trying to decide, just like, okay, yeah, give me the same thing you got. And it's like, takes so much of that overthinking off the table. And then you get to have this fun, positive experience with your child. So yeah, I just think that's so awesome. As far as feeling like, I get this question a lot. Hopefully you feel comfortable at asking. Speaking of moms, here saves along with that. I get this question a lot, but how on those days when you felt like your head was going to explode in recovery, you just felt like you were kind of being stretched then. Hold on just a second. I'm going to keep talking, but I'm going to go pass her off to a helper here. How did you feel like you were still present? How did you feel like you were still able to take care of your child when you felt like your brain was just going to explode and here she is needing you or having an emotional day herself? And, parents feel like when they're in recovery, they have to be perfect. They feel like they have to, be the best mom and show up perfectly every single time. And I tell them, like, have some grace with yourself. Nobody's perfect. And you're kind of sacrificing, you're making an investment in your recovery so that you can be there and more present for your child when you're recovered. So how did you deal with that? Or did you even struggle with that? Did you have guilt about that?
Yeah, we slowed right down, actually. When I think back, we were one of those families that you said, because I had an image in my head of what a mum should be. Not for my own mum, by the way. My own mum was just this fabulous lady that just provided everything you could possibly want. But for whatever reason, I had in this head that, to be a successful mum, we all had to be at clubs every single night, and we all had to be constantly doing homework, and everyone had to be reading and all this stuff. So one of the things that we did is we just slowed right down. Mm-hmm. So Amy would come home from school, and rather than like, right, let's get changed, let's pack our bags, let's go here, we've got swimming, we've got this, that, and the other. It was, right, let's just sit and let's watch a movie on a Wednesday night, as we can. Mm-hmm. And we slowed our entire lives down. And you know what we did by doing that? We all really started to thrive, because we were just present in the house. We didn't feel like we had to, like, and I live in Middlesbrough in the UK. It's always raining here. So like, who wants to go back out once you're in?
Right. Yeah.
So we just, everything just slowed down, and we started to just kind of look at how we didn't need to be busy all the time, and we didn't need to be doing things all the time. We also made it so that like we became kind of like kitchen family. So we would cook together, and we would shop for food together. And it was very much almost like going back to maybe what it was like 20, 30, 40 years ago for many families, where you just started to spend very, very, very simple time together. And then Amy just thought that was great because she wasn't being sent to all these different places all the time. We were home. So that was a big thing for me, was really kind of pressing pause and just slowing things down. The things that she wanted to do, we still did, and the things that she wasn't bothered about doing at all, we moved. And that slowing down of that part of life was just a big signal to the eating disorder that you can be still. You can be settled. You can be happy in your own skin. You can, I've been sat down all day today. I've had a really crazy busy day at work, and I just needed to get stuff done. Now, that would never have happened 4 years ago. No way in the world would she have let me just sit still. But learning that actually stillness is a really important part of life was a really important tool for me to get my head into.
Yeah, I love that. The stillness. Oh my gosh, I love that. Just like that should be a theme throughout your entire recovery. But on top of that, when you have a child, like, what do our kids want more than anything? Quality time. Like they just want to be around us and with us. And so if that means doing less sports and extracurricular activities with them, or sending them to these places, and that means more time at home on the couch, hanging out, playing games, watching movies, like, perfect. That's what you should be doing in your recovery. And your child's going to absolutely eat that up and love it. So the guilt that you're having about having to kind of dumb down your schedule a bit, get rid of it. You don't need to have that guilt. You're doing the very best that you can. And you being home with your kid is the best thing that you can possibly do.
And if someone's got kind of that exercise compulsion that I had in my illness, just check in with yourself. If you're taking the child to the park, what you're doing when you're there. So like if the park is over a mile away and you're suggesting that you walk, that's not you that wants to do that. That's the eating disorder that wants to do that. So jump in the car and drive each other to the park. If you get to the park and you're suggesting that you do a couple of laps round because we might see more ducks, no, that's not you talking. Your child just wants to stand near the pond throwing some bread at the ducks. So just check in with yourself. If you are outdoors doing something that the eating disorder could make more active, just check in that you are, as the mum, you're just sat on the swing as well, going backwards and forwards on the swing. You're sat on the bench watching and waving as they're running around. You don't need to be running after them. If they're going to be in danger, obviously, run after them and get them. But you don't need to be. You can be the mum that sits on the bench with a cup of coffee from the cafe that you've brought with you, and you're watching and you're having fun in that manner.
Right. Absolutely. And that's kind of the flip side of what we were just saying, where your kids can keep you accountable without them even knowing, but you can also really stay in your eating disorder in a lot of ways without them knowing as well. Right. Oh, let's go to the park. It sounds so fun. You ride your bike and I can walk. Of course they're going to love that. Right. Yeah. But you know what you need to do in your recovery is get yourself in the car, let your child bring the bike to the park. They can ride their bike around while you sit on a bench and watch them. Right. So absolutely. I love that point. Do not allow, just because your kids are young and innocent, they don't know all the ins and outs of eating disorder, to take advantage of that and try to justify that or wrap it up in this pretty package of, oh, look, I'm spending all this quality time with my child while I'm playing tag and running up and down the stairs with them and doing all these things that you don't need to be doing. So yeah, really good point.
And you're much more present sat on that bench than you are thinking about how many steps you're doing. You're much more present.
Absolutely. 100%. What can you tell us a little bit about, you're doing some awesome work with Wednesday's Child. Can you kind of tell us what that's about?
Yeah, Wednesday's Child is fabulous. So Wednesday's Child is a UK-based social enterprise company who's founded by a wonderful lady who's also gone through her own recovery journey called Debbie. And we support carers and sufferers of eating disorders in the UK and whomever happens to land in the inbox. So if anyone from other countries are listening, please get in touch. And we offer a whole host of different services for people. But my involvement is I do the podcast. So you might have heard me in your ears if you listen to the Wednesday's Child podcast. I do some befriending. So that one of the big elements of Wednesday's Child is that we offer a befriending service. Now, what a befriender is they are people with lived experience of their own eating disorder and lived experience of recovery who are there to help hold you accountable. So we call it out. You know, I always say to people, you can't kid a kidder. So when I'm on a befriending call and people are talking to me, I'm like, no, hang on a minute. No, let's just stop there. Because what you just said is not you, that is the eating disorder talking. So it can get a bit uncomfortable, but actually you form really strong bonds as a befriender. So you're there to listen to how people's recovery is going, but it's about motivating for recovery. It's not just about sitting and listening to, you know, it's not a therapeutic session in that sense, because we're not therapists. We do offer therapeutic sessions and therapeutic care with Wednesday's Child. They are therapists that work with us and work with our, like I said, both carers and sufferers, and we host support groups and online training and a whole host of things. But we're a small entity at the moment, but with a big mission and a big heart, and we are growing with intensity. But yeah, my input is really the voice on the podcast at the moment. That seems to be what I do the most. But it's all about that. We talk a lot in Wednesday's Child, and this is where I'm absolutely passionate about, is this, the 80-20. So often people go on a certain journey in their recovery and they get to maybe 70, 75, 80% recovered. And you could stay there. You could have quite a happy life in that quasi state where you still have your disorders and your behaviors, but you're able to fulfill at work and you're able to fulfill your role as a mum and a partner and a father and whatever. But actually, if you just took that last step and tried to get that last 20% of recovery done, my word, life gets even more better, even more exciting. And it's about helping people take that last leap often into that bit of recovery that actually isn't reported and isn't spoken about very, very much. The beginning stages is something that's covered a lot on social media and everything, you know, what you eat, how you eat it. But actually what that last 20% looks like of recovery, that's quite a hidden thing. So in Wednesday's Child, we talk to a lot of people about how you make that final leap of faith into that last realm. Because often it's that part, isn't it, where you've held back the behaviors that your eating disorder really wants to keep, or the behaviors that are very personal to you that you can't read about in a book. So actually having someone to talk through that with is really important to hopefully get to that final point of recovery.
Totally. I love that. So many people stop too soon. They stop prematurely. Either they become complacent, the fear gets to them, they think that they're invincible with just those few behaviors they can hold on to. It's innocent, it's not a big deal, no one even knows they're doing them. But those are the ones that 20% turns right back into a relapse. Over time, it's not sustainable. And so I love that you guys work with people to help them. Like you said, those are personal things that you gotta kind of dig, and you kind of have to have experience to know how to dig to get those things out of that person. So yeah, I think that's great.
But that's even really cool. Like, you know, we encourage people to just send all their old clothes to the charity shop, bag them up, send them off, and then save some pennies and treat yourself to new things, because often there'll be a pair of jeans in everyone's wardrobe that, right, at some point I'm going to wear those jeans again. Well, that's just an eating disorder thought. That's not, you don't need to, those jeans do not define who you are as a person. So why are you keeping hold of them? And it sounds simple things, but you know yourself, Becky, that when you're in this illness, those simple things actually can become monumental.
Absolutely. Yeah. I always use this analogy of, like, if you had cancer and you had a tumor and it was this quite large tumor, and they said, okay, you have two options. We'll take the entire tumor out and you have a really good chance at remission and you shouldn't have to deal with this again in the future. Or what we can do is we can take 80% of the tumor out. We'll leave 20% in. You know, it's likely that it could come back. There's always that risk, but the recovery might be a little bit easier. You know, you might recover a little bit faster because it's not quite as large of an incision. It's like, of course you would take the entire tumor out and just deal with the recovery period afterwards, right? Because you don't want to have to deal with it the rest of your life. And so I kind of see it that way. It's like, why would you go through all that work? You're having the surgery anyways. They're cutting through into you to pull this out. Just get the whole thing out, right? And so I kind of feel like if you're doing recovery and you really want to be fully recovered, go all the way. Get rid of the genes. Don't do these little behaviors that you feel like you can hold in your back pocket for a rainy day. Just work on them, tackle them, look straight at them, run into the fear and overcome them so that you can then move on with your life. And you're not living on the edge, you know, on thin ice, worrying every day that you're going to go into a relapse or that you're going to struggle with X, Y, and Z that's going to turn into this catastrophe in the future. So yeah, absolutely.
It's not like that little knot in your tummy.
Mm-hmm.
You need to get rid of that. You don't need to live with this little tightness in your tummy all the time. And that tightness that's a fear, or it's a worry, or it's an anxiety, or it's a spin, or whatever it is. You don't need that little knot. It doesn't need to be there, especially if we actually boil it down. If you find the truth in what actually we're talking about the thing that we have to do in order to live, which is eat. So over that one thing that you have to do it, there is no choice. You don't want to, every time you're faced with it, have that knot in your stomach that's just in that moment preventing you from being part and present of this wonderful experience that is going on around you.
Right.
And you can live without that knot. I absolutely promise you can do that. But it does take some work and effort to get there. But with support and the right cheerleading crowd around you, you can do it.
Absolutely you can. So kind of going into that, our last question is just, what is your experience now being recovered? How is life different? And it could just be some of the most simple things, that have changed since you have found yourself free from your eating disorder. But can you maybe just touch on a couple of those things?
The big one for me is like, there's no fog. So when you're living in an eating disorder, I always like to talk about you've got this fog in front of you, almost like a veil in front of you all the time. And it's really difficult to see through that fog because it's thick and it's lingering and it never leaves you alone. So living without that eating disorder means that there's no fog. What you have to learn, though, to do that is that actually by removing that fog, you're opening yourself up to a whole cataclysmic amount of emotions. And those emotions, when they start coming back, whoa, it's like a train. I don't know whether you remember feeling like that, but like when I was surrounded in my eating disorder fog, if I cried a little bit. When that fog went, blimey, it was like a tornado going on.
Yes.
At the same time, you feel joy again, and you can feel happiness again, and you can feel love again, and passion again, and intimacy again, and all those wonderful emotions come back. So living without that eating disorder fog means that you can feel the highs and lows of life again, and that's a lovely thing to be able to feel again, even the low points, which are not always pleasant. Right. I think it's really important to acknowledge that life isn't perfect because you've recovered. You are still going to stub your toe when you walk across the bedroom floor and it's dark. You're still going to jump into a cold shower and you thought it was warm. You're still going to have arguments with your husband. You're still going to fall out with your friends. That happens. Life right. Keeps on going, but you keep saying that phrase a lot. You can be present in that. And that is really, really, really important, just to be able to be present and then make decisions in the present moment and not half an hour before or 45 minutes after. Right. It's also about, for me, it's like, I've got a job. I had a great job when I was in my eating disorders, but I was living and doing that in a world that wasn't really me. So, I think right. It's about this is my honest self. This is, so the people who listen to this, and if you can watch this video, this is me. This is actually who I am. And it's about recovery for me now has made me realize and acknowledge that this is all right, that this person here, just as she is sat here now, she's all right. And she doesn't need bells and whistles and fancy stuff. She can just be her. And if you don't like it, then I'll try and convince you to like it, because I'm the sort of person that likes people to like me. But yeah, who I am, and ultimately I'm not 6 foot, and ultimately I'm not, I'm not blonde. I am a bit ginger, but this is it. This is who I am. And I think I love it. That's the biggest thing for me, is just feeling that sense of peace in me. Yeah. And that peace in me, I got recovered for me. I didn't get recovered for anybody else. And I'm sorry if that sounds really selfish to people, but by getting recovered for me has allowed me to be the best me for other people. And that's really important for me.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I feel like really, truly you learn that lesson in recovery. Like it's all about stopping trying to fix yourself. It's accepting just being average, like average in every way possible. I felt like once I removed that idea in my head that I had to be superior or above or better or the exception, once I just kind of let go of that whole facade and I was just like, this is me, and turns out I'm actually just pretty average. Like I'm not amazing at one thing or this or that. I'm just kind of average, and I kind of love that about myself now. I love that I don't put that pressure on myself to perform or to be or to look a certain way anymore. And that is the most empowering, freeing experience. And I know you've been through that exact same thing that I just explained yourself when you went through recovery. And it's like a breath of fresh air. It's like a new chance at life. Totally. I can just be. So yeah, I love that.
I'm just under 5'3", so I'm only little. Well, I used to totter around when I was a teacher. I used to totter around in these massive heels. I walk into the office now. I mean, I've got my trainers on. I've got I've got my trainers on. I don't care. You know, it's like, this is, take me as I am. My brain is more important than the size of my body. So acknowledge my brain and let's get on. You know, it's like,
absolutely. Totally.
So
it makes life so much easier and enjoyable to just embrace who you are. I love that.
And accept that this is it. This is who you are. And that's a really brilliant thing, because there is no other you in this world. So this is you, and this is what the world's going to get. And that's a great thing.
Yeah. Oh, I love that message. I want to end on that. That's so great, Sarah. Thank you so much. If you don't listen to Sarah's podcast, or Sarah and Debbie's podcast, Wednesday's Child is wonderful. I highly suggest you go and listen to it. And I know you have a really great Instagram account as well. We've got lots of really good content, good, just practical tools to how to recover. So yeah, thank you so much for all that you do. And I'm so glad that you're sharing your story about your own recovery.
Thank you for having me on this episode. It's really exciting, and I'm going to make all my friends watch it, just so I'm a bit of a star for a moment or two.
Oh, good. Oh, I'm far from a star, but I'm just so grateful that you came on, because I admire your courage and bravery, and also just that you're so willing to talk openly about your experience. So I know you're helping tons of people.
I hope so. But yeah, thank you so much, and hopefully.
Thanks, Sarah.
Bye.
Bye.